Welcome to Global Trends. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. In the spring of 2025, the long-standing alliance between the United States and Canada faced its most severe challenge in decades. For generations, the two nations had prided themselves on a partnership built on trust, open borders, and deeply intertwined economies. But that spring, the relationship was about to be tested like never before. The spark came when President Trump, in a surprise White House press conference, announced sweeping new tariffs on Canadian goods. He cited national security and border concerns, claiming that urgent action was needed to protect American interests and jobs. The announcement caught both American and Canadian officials off guard, sending shockwaves through diplomatic circles. The tariffs were severe: 25% on most goods, 10% on energy exports, and a staggering 50% on steel and aluminum. These measures threatened to unravel decades of integrated supply chains, putting thousands of jobs at risk on both sides of the border. Factories, freight companies, and small businesses braced for impact as uncertainty rippled through the markets. Canadian officials immediately pushed back, disputing the justification for the tariffs. They pointed to official data showing that fentanyl and other illicit drugs rarely crossed from Canada into the US, directly challenging the American narrative. Economists and trade experts quickly weighed in, warning of the potential for long-term damage to both economies. Across North America, the move was widely interpreted as a pressure tactic rather than a genuine security measure. News outlets ran headlines about the escalating trade dispute, and political analysts debated the real motivations behind the tariffs. For many, it seemed like a calculated gamble in a high-stakes political game. In response, Prime Minister Trudeau and Ontario Premier Doug Ford quickly emerged as Canada's leading voices. They addressed the nation, vowing a strong and united response to defend Canadian workers and industries. Behind closed doors, government officials scrambled to craft a strategy, determined not to back down. The announcement marked a dramatic escalation, transforming simmering tensions into an open economic conflict. Negotiations grew tense as both sides dug in, and the world watched closely, aware that the outcome could reshape global trade for years to come. As global markets reacted and newsrooms buzzed with updates, two of the world's closest allies now found themselves teetering on the edge of a full-blown trade war, one with enormous stakes for millions of people on both sides of the border, and for the future of international cooperation itself. In a move that stunned both domestic and international observers, Canada responded with remarkable speed and precision, striking at the very heart of the U.S. economy, its energy supply. The decision was not made lightly, but it was clear that Canadian leaders felt compelled to act decisively in the face of mounting pressure. Ontario Premier Doug Ford took center stage, announcing what he called a trade blackout. This unprecedented measure halted all electricity exports to the United States, a move that sent shockwaves through border states. In addition, Ford imposed a steep 25% surcharge on any power that did make it across the border, specifically targeting Michigan, Minnesota, and New York, states heavily reliant on Canadian energy to keep their lights on and industries running. Ford's message to the U.S. was blunt and uncompromising. They need to feel the pain. His words echoed across newsrooms and government offices, signaling that Canada was prepared to escalate if necessary. Meanwhile, the federal government, under the leadership of Foreign Minister Melanie Joly, was readying a massive economic counterstrike. Officials unveiled a sweeping package of retaliatory tariffs totaling $155 billion, with $30 billion set to hit critical U.S. products immediately. These tariffs targeted industries ranging from agriculture to manufacturing, threatening to disrupt supply chains and raise prices for American consumers. This two-pronged strategy, disrupting energy exports while preparing to unleash a wave of tariffs, was carefully crafted to maximize pressure on Washington. The goal was clear: force the U.S. back to the negotiating table by making the economic consequences impossible to ignore. By weaponizing its energy exports, Canada was not only inflicting immediate economic pain, but also sending a powerful message about its willingness to defend its interests. The move demonstrated a new level of resolve and unity among Canadian leaders, who were determined to stand firm in the face of adversity. The risks were enormous. Escalation could spiral out of control, threatening jobs and livelihoods on both sides of the border. Yet, for Canadian officials, the alternative, doing nothing, was simply not an option. They believed that only bold action could protect their economy and send a clear signal to their southern neighbor. The trade blackout marked a turning point, a bold gamble that ushered in a new era of confrontation between two of the world's closest allies. The world watched, waiting to see who would blink first. The United States relies deeply on Canadian energy, with a particular dependence on electricity and oil that has grown over decades. This relationship is woven into the very fabric of North American infrastructure, with power lines and pipelines crisscrossing the border, quietly fueling millions of American homes and businesses every single day. In 2023 alone, the U.S. imported more than 33 million megawatt-hours of Canadian electricity, enough to keep the lights on in 1.5 million homes across states like New York, Michigan, and Minnesota. This clean, reliable power is especially vital during harsh winters, when demand surges and local grids are stretched thin. When that steady supply was suddenly threatened, either by a blackout or the prospect of steep surcharges, states faced the real possibility of chaos. Utilities scrambled to find alternative sources, but these were often more expensive and less dependable, putting both consumers and businesses at risk of outages and soaring costs. Beyond electricity, Canada is also the single largest supplier of oil to the U.S., sending over 4 million barrels every day, more than all OPEC nations combined. This oil is the lifeblood of American refineries, fueling cars, trucks, and industries from coast to coast. Any disruption to this flow would have immediate and severe consequences. American refineries would struggle to operate, risking fuel shortages at the pump and sudden spikes in gas prices that could ripple through the entire economy. The blackout wasn't just a symbolic gesture, it revealed a critical vulnerability in America's energy security. It forced policymakers and the public alike to confront just how much the U.S. depends on its northern neighbor. What was once a seamless, cooperative energy grid suddenly became a powerful bargaining chip, shifting the balance of power in cross-border negotiations. The economic interdependence that had long united both countries now became a source of tension, fueling a conflict that neither side could easily walk away from. Within 24 hours of the blackout, the U.S. economy suffered a $6 billion loss as utilities scrambled to buy expensive replacement power. The shock rippled through manufacturing, data centers, and other energy-intensive industries, driving up costs overnight. Premier Ford's strategy worked. The pain was immediate and widespread. The spike in electricity prices triggered market volatility and raised fears of inflation. The $6 billion hit was just the beginning. Longer-term impacts loomed, from job losses to reduced industrial output. The blackout was a wake-up call, revealing the risks of economic brinkmanship. Both countries realized the cost of protectionism would be shared. The stability of North American energy markets was suddenly in doubt. The blackout's effects went beyond dollars lost. It threatened U.S. energy security and climate goals. States turned to dirtier, costlier power sources like natural gas and oil, undermining years of clean energy progress. Utility operators scrambled to prevent local blackouts, but the grid was more vulnerable than ever. Higher energy costs hit families and small businesses, fueling inflation and economic anxiety. The dispute, once political, became a kitchen table issue for millions. The blackout exposed the fragility of cross-border energy ties. Calls for U.S. energy independence grew, even as costs and inefficiencies mounted. The crisis was a stark lesson in the hidden costs of economic nationalism. The trade war marked a sharp break from a century of U.S.-Canada cooperation, especially in energy. While Ontario's Doug Ford pushed for aggressive retaliation, other Canadian leaders like Alberta's Danielle Smith favored diplomacy, thanks in part to new export options like the Trans Mountain Pipeline. These divisions reflected Canada's diverse economic interests and regional dependencies. On the U.S. side, the Trump administration doubled down on tariffs, but pressure mounted from affected states and industries. Critics argued the tariffs were self-defeating, hurting American consumers and businesses. The public stance was defiant, but behind the scenes, anxiety grew. The crisis forced both countries to reconsider the risks of deep economic integration. The future of the partnership hung in the balance. With both economies reeling, the U.S. and Canada faced a choice: escalate or negotiate. Further retaliation risked a full-scale trade war, threatening jobs, supply chains, and decades of trust. The blackout's shock created intense pressure for a diplomatic solution. Behind closed doors, talks began as both sides sought an off-ramp. A deal could see the U.S. roll back tariffs in exchange for Canada lifting its energy blockade. The outcome would shape the future of North American trade, cooperation or conflict. The world waited to see if cooler heads would prevail.